ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the Two Average Brand Bros podcast. I'm your host, Prashank,
And I'm your host, Andres.
and today is Monday, September 27th, 2021. Andres, what's up?
Not much, it's been starting to get a little bit hectic over here with life in general. But other than that, still enjoying the nice-ish weather compared to back in Saskatchewan that they're waking up very cold. So I'm still happy that there's nice weather over here. So enjoying that. How are you doing, buddy?
Yeah, I totally agree. My parents have been telling me it's been getting somewhat a little bit colder and colder, but here it's been pretty nice. It's been raining a lot, but yesterday was very nice weather. Got to just enjoy the sun. The leaves are starting to slowly change their color into yellow or red. Whatever else, anything but green. But I mean, as long as fall is warm, I think it should be a fun fall.
I know. I'm very excited to see when I think they started turning over here as well. Just haven't been outside enough to look at them. So,
Andreas, what'd you learn this week, man?
what did I learn this week? There was something that I learned, but it's just not coming to me right now. So I'll think about it. But in the meanwhile, why don't you tell us what you learned this week, Brishak?
Of course. For me, for the most part, of not just me, but everyone around the country learned that the Liberals held on to a minority government again this past election. We talked about the elections 2 episodes ago, and to see the results, I guess I wasn't surprised by the results, but it was kind of a disappointment because I thought it would change, but obviously it didn't change at all. It's the same thing that was before, and it'll be the same thing for another 2 years. So we'll see how it goes, but not really expecting big changes anytime soon. But it was, mostly most of the things that we expected to happen did happen, but still a little bit disappointed with the results.
I know it is fair. I think yeah, everyone is just saying that it's like we're back to where we started. But I guess on that also it shows kind of like the only really the outstanding and thing that came out of it was just Alberta very being it's like being disappointed in terms of I don't want to say the conservative movement, but just with Kenny in general, and it showed up in their numbers, right? So I think that's the that's the biggest thing that happened, I suppose, is that Alberta didn't paint itself entirely blue.
Yep, exactly. So, I mean, you can't really expect much change over 2 years, but it kind of also showed how, online people were saying, oh, the conservatives are going to win, and people were bracing for that, but clearly, people are still okay with the Liberals leading Canada right now.
Exactly. And I mean, well, but now I hope they get back to work. So,
Let's hope so.
yeah. And now I remember what I learned. So, I learned and I was just watching the news. It was about the Huawei CFO. You know that she's been in house arrest over in BC. So I learned about that as well as the two Michaels. I did not know the story behind the two Michaels. So I went in a little bit of a rabbit hole to understand the house arrest of the Huawei CFO, but also why the two Michaels were detained over in China.
Oh, yeah. Something happened. I think the Michaels are back in Canada, right?
Yes. So what happened is that they are not extraditing anymore, or like the U.S. dropped the extradition process for the CFO. So then Canada was like, well, there's no point on us keeping her in house arrest over here. I think she was in Vancouver. Magically, the two Michaels were able to be on an airplane uh, back to Canada. Just as the CFO gets released, the two Michaels now are able to come back after I think it was 1,000 days or something. So
Holy.
yeah, that was just yeah, that was the news, and I think it happened Thursday or Friday. So yeah, that's the big news right now.
Right, right. It'll be good for their families and them to be finally be back in Canada.
Yeah, it would be nice. I mean, it was a very long time, but I guess as we were talking about the election and government, let's see what the government does about the situation, because it does seem a little bit fishy and sketchy that
Right,
they got released at the same time that the CFO did. So,
right, right. Yeah, that makes sense. Well, Andreas, this last couple of weeks we've had some more serious topics. We had talked about elections, and then last week we talked about big news events that has happened in our lifetimes. So this week I figured it'd be a nice time to talk to the listeners, talk to each other about our personal careers. So like what we wanted to do as a young kid, what we've done for the last little bit, and what we want to do in the future. Just I think it'd be a really fun conversation to have.
absolutely, I think that's a good one to talk about.
All right, so Andreas, tell us a little bit about your career, your journey, what you wanted to do when you were a kid, and as you grew older and older, what if that changed over the times, and then what you're doing now, and then what you want to do in the future.
So my career, I don't know, it's been a little bit like it's different what I wanted to do as a kid compared to what I wanted to do now, right? Um, as a kid, I wanted to be involved in international relationships and international relations. Wanted to be working at the UN, so that was my dream at the time. Um, but then slowly, I don't know, throughout middle school and high school, as things started to progress, and you start taking more classes. Uh, for me, I started to get more into the sciences and being more interested about around the human body and research and all of that. So then my goal changed from being an ambassador or a UN person to being a scientist. So very drastic change. Obvious. Still wanted to help people, but no longer in a in a social science kind of way, but more in the scientific kind of studies and all of that. So yeah, so that's kind of like where my science side comes from. And then since then, it's just been working my path, doing a degree in science and all of that, working my path slowly to now wanting to be in public health and helping people that way. But I guess throughout the episode, we'll touch a little bit more in the details of how that came to be a little bit more and the future of that. But let's hear from you, Rishang. How did everything go for you? Kind of like that path from what you wanted to be as a kid to where you are right now.
Yeah, so with me, as a kid, two of the things that were always at the top of my career list was being number one a pilot, and number two, or I guess not and but or number two an ATC, so an air traffic controller. I'm sure you see the similarities or the common themes between the two. It's working at a airport with airplanes, and like ever since I was a kid, I love airports and airplanes. So that's what my goal was. But then as I grew older, I realized how really hard and long and just costly it can be to be like air traffic controller or even a pilot, like especially a pilot. And not coming from like a high income family, or even for the longest time we weren't even a middle income because my parents were students for the longest time. It was tough because I wanted to be a pilot, but it was just not affordable. And I guess I think that's related to a lot of people, because to make money you need to have money, so. But as I grew older, I thought of different possibilities that would help me work at airports. And and then that's where I landed on aerospace engineering. So initially, right after high school, like I said in earlier episodes, did apply to aerospace engineering, but then I realized the market for that is very, very saturated and very strict. So then that took me over to civil engineering. So I decided, maybe I can get into airport planning, design. So slowly went to civil engineering, then focused more on transportation, engineering planning. Well, I haven't really worked directly at airports and airplanes. I think my long-term goal is still to do that, whether it's a large airport or middle-sized airport. I think it'd be really cool But it has been tough because most of the jobs, are catered around roads and highways or cities, which is pretty fun. Like I don't mind doing that right now, but it's definitely not what wanted to be when I was younger, obviously. But life is strange where you think you want to do this thing, but then obviously you can't, so you do something else. And I think so. Right now, I am working as transportation engineer, like we've discussed in the past. And then my future, let's see, right? So as much as I want to continue being an engineer, long term, I think I want to switch my career slightly, to incorporate more of the data science and data analyst jobs that have been, booming in the last little bit. Data science is definitely one of the biggest, um, I guess, career fields that have been booming for the last little bit and will continue because, especially with machine learning and AI improving, I think it's going to be huge. And even applying that to transportation engineering, I think it'd be really cool to see.
Yeah, no, data science is where things are at the time. Absolutely. And that's it. Yeah, and yeah, like it shows, right, that paths are one. Even if you want to go into university, not everything is fixed, right? Not everything is like this is what I want to do, or this is what I'm gonna be doing the entirety of my life. So that's pretty cool, man.
Absolutely. And I think that's what's daunting the most to a lot of people because you realize, once you start a career or, once you start working, you're pretty much doing the same thing Monday to Friday or, even extended hours if you have one of those wacky shifts for, 40, 50 years. And I think that scares people because it gets boring after a while, obviously. Like when you're in university, you have so many classes and so many people, you see all the time. But then once you start working, it's the same, you know, process every day, forever, pretty much.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, it gets like for lack of a better word, it gets very monotonous.
Yep, absolutely. And of course, you can always do other things, besides work. But like, let's be honest, work takes a big chunk of your life, right? You're working during the daytime every day. Of course, you got vacations here and there, but for the most part, your life has to be dedicated to work for for to make money to support your family if you have one. So even yourself, like living these days is pretty expensive.
Oh yes, extremely expensive. Just life keeps on getting expensive, Not cool, but yeah, I know that's what it is. And I think for me, I'm like on like around a similar track like you are in terms of figuring out what I want to do for a life. It's just right now is like a change of paths that I'm encountering. At the end of the day is after doing my degree in science and all of that, I decided to go into the field of student affairs, and I did work over there for a bit. Well, not even just for a bit. I worked there for almost 4 years in a way. So after that, then yes, I think over there I started seeing a little bit more the social science part of mental health because during my undergrad I was very interested in neuroscience, and especially there was this one article that this is really where a lot of it came down to, because at the beginning I was just like, oh, I wanted to know more about uh, mental conditions and kind of like how they develop on the brain, Alzheimer's, multiple sclerosis, ALS, and kind of like all of um, these neurological conditions, because not a lot has been figured out of them, and there's a lot of science behind them. But then there was this one article that I read during university that showed kind of like the impact of trauma on not even just on the brain, but genetically, kind of like how it impacted um, just being exposed to something like to a traumatic event. Well, this was done with mice, eating mice, because I guess doing it with doing it with humans would be really probably will not be ethical to do that. So um, so with that, then kind of like when I became part of the student affairs realm, I started being more interested on understanding the social part of it, and as well, kind of like the healthcare part of mental health and mental conditions. And that's kind of like what drew me into public health, just because I started seeing the impact of kind of like an individual, like a lot of individuals' mental health, how it really impacted the community overall. And I'm just like, well, if it's impacting everyone, then this is not a matter just now of personal health. It becomes a matter of public health and kind of like how we can really change, right? Like how a society evolves around it. So that's kind of like what brought me into public health. And yeah, part of me was is very interested in the data of it and just applying the data that we have in terms of those like those kind of diseases and conditions and applying it for public health measures and health policy. uh, but yeah, definitely the numbers are it's where it's at right now. Getting hip nowadays is knowing how to analyze data, in my opinion.
Yep, I wholeheartedly agree because even a lot of people that I've met over the last couple of years, a lot of people have been doing that data science, data analyst, masters or even bachelors. I think, like I said earlier, that is because especially going forward, a lot of things are going to be technologically advanced. Like we saw it with the introduction of self-driving cars like Tesla, where it relies heavily on data, right? So all the algorithms that go into it, all the AI things. I think it's like we said, it's going to be heavily a factor going forward in so many ways. Whether it's in the healthcare field or in building things. There's just so many possibilities because it's literally a new way of thinking that back 20, 30 years ago people really didn't think about it because they thought it wouldn't happen over their lifetime, but obviously with the way technology advances so quickly and quickly, it's going to affect us all.
That is absolutely true. And I think for that, I think the confusion that a lot is coming up to is like everyone to be a data scientist or to be a data analyst, sorry, you have to somehow have made it through computer science, which I think the more it's expanding, the better. I mean, you will understand a lot more, I would say, the behind the scenes and algorithms and AI and all of that, but every field has its own way to like be a data analyst, right? And like technology and softwares have improved so much that if you become skilled and proficient in one of them, one like in a software that is relevant to your field of work, um, and you know how to operate it. And I mean, there's lots of courses online for that. That's kind of like nowadays how you become a data scientist. Um, it just depends. Like, do you want to go more on the technical side of data science and build the programs to be able to do that? Or are you going to be more on the practical side of data science and you're the one inputting the data and like doing the analysis and interpretation of it? So I think that's kind of like where the field is growing, but not a lot of people have that kind of like have that understanding because let's be real, everyone thinks that to do that you have to be an expert or you would have had to do something computer science related, which is not truly completely true.
Exactly, and that's where you see a lot of online, like Udemy, Coursera. They're really getting popular because people want to do more than what they're actually doing right now. Like I don't know if that made sense, but like they want to do more in life with their careers than what they're were taught in bachelors or masters, which is really nice to see.
So, yeah, so with that, yeah, I guess that like for me that's kind of like with bringing it back to topic and kind of like what our career looks like. guess right now, like, after being involved in student affairs and deciding like there's work that needs to be done in regards to our healthcare system, in terms of mental health. People love saying like, oh yes, mental health, we need to, like, we're so open on making it aware, but then the system hasn't caught up to it, because still it is one of the services at the hospitals, at least, that is way under service, way understaffed, and well under resourced, right? So there needs to be public health policies that, in order to put more pressure into it, but also in order to do that, we live in a world that, if you can show that it is cost effective and that money is worth investing, um, then you get the money and the resources. So I guess that's kind of like, for me, that's where it's coming, and where I'm trying to aim to is being able to analyze the data out there, or collect the data, um, and then analyze it and interpreting it in order to show like, hey, we do need resources, but this is kind of like how we can go about it from a community slash public health aspect, that is a little bit different to coming at it from like an individual health standpoint. So I think that is where am I right now, and with that, just having a full-time job as an adult and as a professional, I'm back to the student life. Uh, but it is part of it. It's just, I mean, out of like an entire lifespan, being able to do this work later on, I think I can give up 2 years of my life to be back a student, and living, a little bit like a student again. But I think it is what it takes, and I mean, it's a like a short term sacrifice for a longer term reward, and it's part of pursuing the dreams. Do I agree that I should be paying this amount of money to be able to do that? Not entirely, because it is a field that is really growing. But we gotta do what we gotta do in order to be able to do the work that we want to do.
Absolutely, and that's a really good way to say it, because a lot of people are confused. They start working like me, like you start working as soon as you graduate, and then you get confused if you want to go back to do your masters, or you want to do like different diplomas afterwards or certificates, just to, like, obviously the one number one thing that drives us all, no matter how much we want to deny it, is money, right? So obviously, as you do more of those um, certificates, or even a master's degree, obviously your pay is going to go up, and which helps, not only you, but whoever you need to support. So I think that's a good point, because a lot of people don't know if they want to do their masters, because masters is expensive, right? But then, like you said, it's a good short-term sacrifice for a long-term gain.
Yeah, definitely. But it is part of all of that, kind of like dealing with the situation, because yeah, there's sometimes that, um you want to do it, but then money's tight, or they're like, financially the funding isn't there, which is just like, you can have all the ambition to do it, but that's a story for a different time. But yes, I say, like, start look, like, if you really want to pursue something, look at the different options. If it's meant to be, I always say, things work out, that you'll always find a way to work out things. So just a matter of sometimes really doing a lot of research and doing a lot of digging.
So, on my end, it was kind of like, so I had an internship after my third year of university where I worked for the Ministry of Saskatchewan. It was a government job. It was fun. I learned a lot, but obviously I didn't, it wasn't as exciting as some of the other, consulting jobs that some of my friends got at the time. And then, so when I graduated from university and I got a consulting job, I was pretty excited, because it's something new. I'd never done that before, and I had heard a lot of things about the consulting world, where it is very cutthroat, but is you learn a lot because you're doing working on so many projects. So, upon graduation, when I started working, I was actually doing bridge engineering stuff. So, a couple of things like bridge inspections, and then go on projects where they were replacing bridges, which is really neat. Pretty cool because you're working with contractors and the clients to make sure everything is run smooth and safely. It's built safely, and it's pretty cool to see as as the bridge came along. And then once it's done, it's like, whoa, I was working on that project. And then after 1 year of bridge engineering, I transferred to the transportation engineering planning, where it's mostly consistent of traffic evaluation, so intersections, highways, things like that. And I think I have had a lot of fun because the software is fun, but I think after a while it just gets a little bit tedious and repetitive, like very, like you said earlier, monotonous. Especially report writing. Like I'm a guy who loves to do things on like Excel and PowerPoint and software rather than be writing reports, which is what I do a lot nowadays. It has, I think, improved my report writing, but obviously after a while, it gets a little bit tough because that's pretty much all you're doing, report writing, report writing. But it has been such a learning experience in the last 3 years, going from one project to the next, whether whether I was working with bridges or with transportation engineering planning, and I think one of the biggest things about working for a consulting company, whether small or big, is the resources you have. For a big one, obviously, you see the projects from all around the world. You see what they're doing in Hong Kong or Switzerland or, even here in Canada, across the country. And it's super cool. And working for a smaller company, it obviously not as many resources, but it's still a lot more cohesive, I guess, because, you're working on things together with your teammates pretty much, and a lot of people on your team, versus a big company where you really don't know, you only know your personal team of 10, 20, whatever it is, but you don't know everyone in the company, versus small one where you kind of do. So it's been kind of changed, working for government as a intern, full time in consulting. I think long term, I think it'd be really nice to, like I said, I do still want to work at an airport, so that's still my goal going forward. But the one hard thing I've realized is just, not even like me personally, but just career hunting and job hunting. Um, Sometimes, some of the times it does get frustrating because they'll ask for so much more experience than you have, even if it's like an entry level or a mid level job. And that gets frustrating because it's like there's a job that you really want, but then it'll be like 7 years of experience in this field where you don't have that experience in that particular field, right?
Well, yeah, it gets challenging because, like we mentioned, right? Like some of us, like we've been jumping from one field to another, and that's how like we've been figuring things out. But then I don't know, there's just like this huge disconnect on kind of like what companies expect compared to what's actually out there in like in the job market. There's like a big disconnect, and that's something I've noticed a lot. It's like there's a disconnect in terms of kind of like what people are looking for compared to what is really out there. So I think it's just like a matter, like on those ones sometimes I just say, you know what, just take a chance and if you feel you're qualified for something, apply for it. And you have the opportunity either on your CV to really showcase that, or you have an opportunity, like if you have to write a personal statement or a cover letter, to really show that as well, that you're capable of doing the work. And I think, um, for like, and I can say it for experience, like I thought like to get into a very, I would say, or like the program that I'm doing is very numbers heavy, uh, very that. I thought I will need more, mathematical skills, or more statistics background. But truly, I think what really helped was really I'm putting effort into showing that, hey, this is where my experience at. This is how I will benefit out of this. uh, but I am capable of taking on the program. And I think the same approach should be done kind of like when, like if you want to pursue a particular career and you have the skills for it, like the starting skills for it, like in those different documents that you have to provide for an application, doing your best uh, to showcase like my experience might not be on this field, but tailoring your experience to this is how it can be applied to this new field. And I think that really helps. And I think it's like a good way to approach it.
Yep, absolutely. And resume building and interview tips, that definitely we could, because we've both done that for a long time now. But I think that's definitely a good episode for the future. But I do want to touch up on it a little bit, because maybe someone's out there listening saying, you know how do I make my resume stand out compared to the other applicants?
And that's a very valid question, and I think we all go through it. And part of it is one of, I would say, pretty quick tips. One of it is keeping it up to date, right? It's always nice to keep your resume or your CV up to date, because if you don't, then it becomes a massive task to do. So keeping it up to date, giving it a look every so often. And to make it stand out, I would say number one is look at those particular, like go really whenever you're building it of it's nice to have, yeah, the generalities and the common tasks, like the general tasks you had in any job. But how to make it really stand out is really focusing on the details and like the specific like things that you did that were pretty unique to that position, because then that's kind of like how you start making it stand out a little bit in terms of the content. Is not just putting the, like, if I don't know, if you were an assistant and you just put very general things an assistant does, uh from like an employer or like a recruiting aspect, it's just like, oh, someone else with that experience. But if you tailor that information in order to showcase like, yeah, I was an assistant, but this is kind of like what I did in a more detailed way that applies to the current job, right? So like if you were an assistant before for someone in retail, and you're changing to consulting, kind of like trying to find those bridges that connect both of them. Sometimes it can be hard, sometimes you really have to really make some harsh connections, or very like, they seem to connect but not really type of connections between skill sets. But it shows that you're really looking forward on kind of like how you can apply things. So I would say that's another quick thing to do. And the other one, honestly, it comes down to visuals. I know, Word has templates and all of that, but really make it your own CV, make it your own resume. Once again, a lot of these things take time, but once again, it's a short-term sacrifice for a long-term reward. And just visually make it stand out and make it look like this is my resume, this is my CV, and it doesn't just look like a collection of bullet points. Like make it your own. Like add some, especially nowadays with graphic design being a big thing that everyone is able to access, or like most people can access it, just put a little bit like a professional but nice, visually appealing, like twist to it. And visually, like sometimes those resumes stand out just because, from once again, from a hiring recruiting point of view, it looks like people put effort into it. How about you, Brishang? What are some things that you've noticed that really help with resume building?
Yeah, I think just being I guess this, a lot of people do it, but I think just being truthful, but like you said, just tying your work experience to the job you are applying, that helps a lot. Because when recruiters or like hiring managers go through your resume and they see non-relevant jobs, like they're obviously going to think, oh, he doesn't really, or he or she doesn't really have worthwhile experience. But if you can, even if you've done something like retail and you're going into an engineering job for the first time in your life, I think just finding a way to connect your experiences, like you said, definitely helps a lot. Because you're applying for an engineering job, you're not applying for a retail job anymore. But then again, with that, you have to be truthful, because if you put up straight up lies, or straight up not being honest, and it comes back later when you're actually working, it's gonna obviously bite you in the butt, right? So I think being truthful with your work and what you've done. And number two, I think, it always like it's a little bit tedious sometimes, but even taking online courses if you can, whether it's, for free or paid ones, I think those always help a little bit because it shows an initiative that you've taken on. Like whether you took it through Udemy or open, you know, um, Coursera or any of those like online, um, I guess, online websites where you can take courses and get certificates for some of them. I think that always helps. You have to do those things to show that, oh, hey, I'm interested in this. I'm taking the initiative to do this. And look, it's right here.
And I think you touched the right point there. And it's an initiative, right? If you really want to do something, I mean, nothing is going to be given to you or put in your hands in a silver plate. You have to do the work. And I think that's something I want to drive home is you have to make the work. Like nothing like it's easy if you really want to go for it. And initiative is a big part of it. And like just even like you listening to both of our stories for both of us, it has taken, right, it has taken a lot of work, but also like putting in the effort in the different positions and the different capacities um that we've worked throughout so far, and realizing, for example, that okay, I guess my growth over here is done. I need to move on to do something different, or I need to move on in order to keep on working and keep on reaching to where I want to be. Um, and finding kind of like the little things that can keep you progressing, because once you're stagnant and there's no growth, then really you're just gonna be there. So it takes work, but it's just like if you really want to do it, you'll find the motivation to really get through.
Absolutely. So, with that, Andres, I want to ask you, what are certain, we gave resume tips, but now I want to ask, what are some career tips that we can give to listeners that are, potentially thinking about switching careers or just starting their career as a whole?
One of them I would say will be don't be afraid to explore your options. Like job fields right now are so broad, but at the same time so specific. It's a very both ends of the spectrum. But don't be afraid to explore things. I mean, we were taught that by our early 20s, we should be able to figure out our careers, but just the way that things have been set up and the way that education and jobs and all of them have been lining up, sometimes it's really hard to do that, and you have to understand that part. You gotta be willing to explore and willing to be more on the kind of like if you find something of interest, I think career wise, just look into it. If it's something that really grabbed your attention, look into it, right? Like in your case, when you were like being into airports and planes and all of that, and you still want to be part of that, like you've been doing kind of like how can I get involved into it, right? So I guess like if someone is really like if something is really of your interest, explore the different options to be involved in that field. And if you're like on your older 20s, 30s, and you just want to change careers, also look into that. If the current career you're having is not fulfilling your life or is not in a certain way, I don't like saying like making you happy, because being happy can change so often depending on your circumstances at the time. But if it's not really fulfilling you, or you feel like you like there's something else out there for you, or like you found another field to be part of, honestly find a way to make that transition. Because if it's gonna fulfill you at the end, like you said, if you're gonna have to be 9 to 5 on a job based on kind of like how it works, you want to be 9 to 5 on something that you're gonna have the motivation to do it for a long time. um so don't be afraid to make that transition, I will say. So explore and change it that's what's best for you. How about you, Rishang? What are some career tips you have for our listeners?
I think the one that I tell everybody, and even myself that I've been telling is do it for yourself. Um, Coming from immigrant culture, you often want to make your parents happy or your family happy, and they'll be like, "Oh, go be a doctor, go be an engineer," because obviously those are like highly sought out in places where we were raised and born. And sometimes it is tough to say no. I want to do this, but I think the way you have to look at it is like you just mentioned you're working 9 to 5 or 8 to 5, whatever it is, Monday through Friday, 52 weeks a year, forever, for your life. So you really have to enjoy what you do, because if you don't enjoy it, you're going to be pretty miserable. Because besides sleep, which is also supposed to be 8 hours a day, work takes the most amount of time in your day, right? So if you work for 8 hours a day and sleep for 8 hours a day, the rest of the time is divided. So really, like, work does take majority of your time. So you really got to enjoy what you do, and don't do it for others. Don't do it for the money. Obviously, money helps, and that's not to say obviously you can't just be working certain jobs all your life, because as a person you want to progress too and learn more things. But definitely, when you're in high school, when you're in university, do it for yourself. It sounds a little bit selfish, but I think in the long run you're gonna thank yourself more, because I've heard so many stories about people going to be doctors, or like in the medicine field, because that's what their parents wanted, or that's what society back home dictates for them. But then they end up hating it, and they get so stressed because they just don't enjoy it. So for me, I'd rather do something that I like and get paid a little bit less, versus do something that I don't like just to get paid a little bit more. So maybe a lot more in some cases, but at the same time, I'd want to be happy with my job. And if you actually enjoy what your parents have told you to do, then by all means do it. But like you said, if you go 5, 10, 20 years down the line and you don't like it, don't be afraid to change. Which also comes with a little bit of warning, because obviously when you're young, you can afford to make career changes. When you're older and have a family, right?
Yep, I think that's the important part. It's just when you're making that change or that transition, is just looking into what that transition is gonna look like. Like I know that people just like to make the jump, but be mindful also of things. But yeah, I think from both of us, even though we're very young, uh, though at times we like to call ourselves that we're old, though we're still on the younger side of things, I think we've learned a lot that we can share with everyone. And once again, this is coming from our experience as two brown people, uh, coming from immigrant parents or just being immigrants ourselves. This is kind of like what we've experienced, and you can see like there's a lot of parallels between the different fields, right? Like Prishang being more on the engineering, a consulting side of like work, compared to myself that I'm more, I've been more involved on the science and the student affairs, social type of work. But you can see there's a lot of similarities in between, and a lot of, some of those tips or a lot of those things to apply. It doesn't matter what field you're in, they're applied to everyone. So, are there fields that are like the better off than others? Yes, but the hard work in any field will you'll be able to showcase it and you'll be able to thrive. Honestly, when you are on the field that you're meant to be and you're doing what you really enjoy, you're gonna thrive. You will see a drastic change and like a very good change in your life. But yeah, it is nice once you've found what you really want to do in life.
Absolutely, that's a good way to put it. So with that, I think that's a pretty solid talk. With your career path and my career path, and even just going forward, how we're going to approach things. And if anyone has questions, we're not professionals by any means, but we have experienced, our own career paths through our lenses, and we can always relay, advices and things that we've learned over the years.
That is very true. But with that, Mershing, what are you looking forward for this week?
This week, fall has been coming, and it's coming, I guess, in Ottawa. The like I said earlier in the episode, the leaves have been changing colors. So I'm looking forward to my enjoying the fall. As much as I don't like winter, I think fall is still doable. The yes, we don't really get to experience that back in Saskatchewan. So I think experiencing that here, just looking at the leaves, all the maple leaves turning the different colors of the rainbow. Pumpkin spice lattes, obviously, got to be basic. So just enjoying that and, you know, working like always. Got to get paid somehow. How about you, Andres?
um, for me this week it's a little bit hectic. With there's just a lot of things to do school wise. So trying to figure out what my actually like what my week is gonna look like so that I'm able to keep myself sane with that. But I'm also so on Sunday we had our first soccer match as part of like the team that I have with some classmates over here. So I'm looking forward for next weekend for our game because I don't know. I always look forward to doing things outside of class and with people. So I'm very excited for that. I'm also excited for the autumn and starting to see the leaves change, and maybe I'll go for more longer walks along the river or in the mountain, just to get more of that sense of fall. But I'm excited for sweater weather. Like my closet is ready to be shown to people in Montreal. So I'm very excited about it.
Yeah, it should be a good season. And obviously, for me personally, not looking forward to winter, like you said, but you know, time goes on, so gotta be prepared for the upcoming winter.
No.
Well, with that, that wraps up today's episode. If you have any comments, concerns, questions, or crybaby stuff, reach out to us on our many social media pages. If you, like I said earlier, if you want to talk about your career, or you just want to rant about your career, or you just want some advices, just reach out to either Andres or myself, and we'll be happy to talk to you. I think, everyone, it's nice to have a third opinion or fourth opinion or even a 99th opinion on life choices. It never hurts just to hear a different perspective on how people have been going about their career. We're always here for you. DMs are always open. And Andres, where can they reach us?
You guys can reach us out the Two Average Round Bros podcast, either on Twitter or on Instagram. And then from there, later on the Instagram, you can reach us out on our own Instagrams. Also, they're over there, so you can always link us up there. But we're there. So like honestly, if you have anything to talk about or any question, or you're just curious to know something about Rishank, myself, or both of us, just slide into our DMs. This is it one time. I'm letting people know you are allowed to slide into my DMs. But yeah, that's where you can reach us out to.
All right, perfect. Thanks for listening again. And, talk to us.
Other than that, we'll catch you next Monday. Bye.
See ya.